Yeah, no, perfect. Everything
Okay, good.
is perfect. Wow. Okay. You are literally the the man on the never-ending expedition at the moment. I love
Yeah, I
it.
guess.
Love it.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, are you out on the road at the moment? Are you in your home or you're
Yeah, yeah, I'm out in Arizona right now. Yeah, I don't even have a house anymore. Me and the wife sold the house and we just live in an RV now. So I'm just
wow,
full time traveling
that's
at
the
the moment.
dream.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's got its set of challenges as you can imagine,
Oh
you know.
yeah, sure. Marriage in a smaller space. I'm sure there are challenges to that.
Yeah, yeah, but it's all worked out really well. So we're enjoying it. I don't have any plans to quit anytime soon, so
That's
we'll just kind of
amazing.
see what happens.
And what about, I mean, because you've been traveling, is it for 2 years
Yeah,
now?
a little over 2 years now. Yeah.
Okay. So what about with all of the shutdowns and all the restrictions and everything? How was that moving about during that time?
It just depended. It really varied a lot
Mm.
from state to state. I mean, for the most part, it didn't really affect you as far as traveling in an RV because a unit self-contained. I've got my
Ah,
own
okay.
shower, bathroom. So you can check into, like contactless check in on all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It
It's
did,
not
a
like
lot of
you
places.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of places I wanted to go, had some restrictions, things like that. Like a lot of your Indian land, like the Navajo Nation, it
Oh
was
well. Mm.
really shut down hard. I mean, you couldn't, unless you were a resident, you couldn't really go anywhere. And then, even the residents, I mean, I think they even had like curfews and stuff and
Um,
some of the I don't know if it was like they're nationwide or
yeah.
if it was just certain towns, but I mean they had like actual curfews and things.
I
But
spoke to a friend who's part of the Mohawk nation, and yeah, they had like a pretty strict vaccine policy and
yeah,
everything within, the tribal land, I think within the
yeah,
population. And that would
yeah,
surprise me actually, because I mean, whatever people's thoughts are about that whole thing, all this time later now, but at the time I was surprised that they were so up for it, I suppose.
yeah. I
What with their
was,
experience with federal government, I thought
yeah, I
they'd be a
kind
little
of
more
was.
reticent. Yeah.
I really was too, but it was like that. I mean, I certainly couldn't speak for all the tribes, and they all, all
No,
their
sure,
land is,
same. Yeah.
kind of sovereign. They sort of do their own thing, but
Mm.
it was the same way in other places, like on the East Coast. The Cherokee
Yeah.
Nation in North Carolina. I mean, they were shut down hard, and I mean it.
Yeah.
Like I went back like a year later through there, and it really took an effect. Because I mean things just like were run down, and I mean they lost a lot of the outside business and stuff that they
Because of
did.
all of
So
the
yeah,
yeah, the casinos and things like that, right?
yeah,
And all the other
yeah.
the growing businesses. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think, worldwide, during 2020, because I worked in healthcare for a long time, and
Hmm.
I was made responsible for, I didn't ask to be, but I was myself and two other colleagues who are running, it's called primary care networks, which is
Hmm.
it's essentially you've got 5 or 6 GP general practitioner clinics with maybe total 50,000 patients, and you get a budget to give them extra services and sort of join up their resources to help them
Yeah,
work. And the GPs were given the contract for their patients, their cohorts, to have the vaccine, and the PCNs took it on. So myself and two other colleagues were sort of shipped into this big race course locally in Surrey and made to run this. Yeah, this was sort of December when it started, 2020. And made to run this vaccine center sort of day and night, 12 hours a day for the next
damn.
6 months. And it
Wow.
was, and we were sat in with the JCVI, which is the Joint Committee for Vaccination here in the UK, and eye-opening, very eye-opening.
I could
Um,
imagine.
well, what they say is, without going into any details, is it's the same in every company, that things are never as professional as they seem outwardly, and people aren't as smart as they should be. in certain
Yeah.
positions of authority, and that seemed to ring true to me throughout that whole period. That's all I'll
Yeah.
say about it. Um,
I can imagine.
I'm sort of checking in now and again on your profile on your website, seeing the different locations you're arriving at, the different types of books that are coming out. I'm just like, wow, like Denver has actually become one of the sort of the unsung heroes of cryptozoology, but also the paranormal and even these sort of like mythology, North American mythology and folklore. You know, the tales of giants and other things that you're looking at all the time, and it's just amazing. You know, essentially, I don't think enough people know, or at least it doesn't appear to me enough people know about the work that you're doing, and I think they should.
Well,
Basically, you know, I have two of your books because I love lake monsters. I've got one of Monsters South of the Border,
yeah.
which, you know, for a lot of people who don't know, it's literally about South American, largely South American water cryptids. It's amazing. I mean, there's Nahualito and things like that in there, but there's things I've never heard of in there,
Yeah.
you know. And of course, people are seeing something that's you know, it's a classic as well. But you do more things than that. You write about giants and little people
Yeah.
and you know other things as well. So from the cryptozoological sort of point of view, just run us through a few of your interests and some of the discoveries you've made on your journey around the USA.
Well, yeah, for me, I mean, cryptozoology is, I'm into really any kind of, strange, unusual topics, but, really do love cryptozoology and always have. And I guess, sort of from an early age, the lake monsters really kind of roped me in because, and I've probably shared this with you before when we talked, but to me, out of every possible cryptid that's out there, and I'll lump like sea serpents, river monsters, just those water creatures. That's got to me, the biggest possibility of actually existing, actually being real. And I'm not throwing shade on Bigfoot or any of that, but the point is, there's just so much water. It's so hard to explore, and even as far as like Bigfoot goes, I mean, anybody can really kind of get out and kind of look for Bigfoot, but it's quite another thing to actually try to do any kind of meaningful field research as far as these water creatures go. Because I mean, boats cost money. These these underwater drone. I mean, that stuff costs money, and
A lot of
you
money.
know,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I've not really been able to do anything meaningful as far as like research wise. I don't guess is like field type
Mm.
research as far as your water monsters go. But they just fascinate me so much. I just think that there's got to be something to those tales. And actually, when me and my wife were out in Montana back in 2001, in the summer, you've heard of Flathead Lake, I'm sure, out in Montana.
Mm. Yeah.
For your listeners that haven't, it's just this amazingly just gorgeous lake in Montana. It's maybe about 20 miles south of Kalispell, probably about an hour and a half drive from Glacier
Mm.
National Park. But what sets that lake apart is the clear water. I mean, no joke. You can like wade out like to your chest, and you can see your feet just like you're looking through a piece of glass. It's just
Wow.
that clean and amazing. But anyway, long story short, there's been probably 100 or better like documented sightings of your typical lake monster type reports from that lake. And me and my wife, we were driving over along the lake, over I'm calling it the other side. It's a one, like on one side there's like a pretty big road, US highway. The other side's more like a narrow 2-lane road, like kind of like real steep drop offs, nowhere to pull over. But we're just driving along, and like I see like a couple humps in the water out of the corner of my eye, and I'm just kind of like
Wow.
slowing down. And my wife, she's like, are you seeing this? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't want to say nothing because I'm trying to kind of like process what I'm seeing, if that makes sense. And she's like, no, there's like something in the water there. And didn't see like a lot of the
Mm.
witnesses, where you had the neck sticking up, out of the water a few feet, but did see like three humps, in the water. And then just all of a sudden, you know and there's like no place to pull over here. I had like somebody
Mm.
behind me. It's all private property, nowhere to pull over. So, I wasn't able to get a picture. And, it was so brief, we couldn't have got a, you stereotypical sighting. But anyway, I mean, it just uh, as quick as you saw it, it just shoot, just like sunk down in the water.
Wow.
Not like you'd see like with a, I know all your debunkers, it's a wave, and a boat, but I mean, there's no boats around. And yeah, I
Mm.
mean, I understand that you can get a wake on the other side of the lake from where a boat
Yeah,
is, blah
sure.
blah blah. But I mean, it just it didn't seem like
And
that
you
to me.
saw what appeared to be physical humps,
Yeah, yeah. I
and
mean,
they
there's like,
sank
it looked
from
like
sight. They
like
didn't
hump.
dissipate. They
Yeah,
sank.
I mean, maybe, and and my wife saw it too. So I mean, if she didn't say it, I don't even know if I would, or I don't even know if I'd be bringing it up right now. Take it for what it's worth. But
Sure, sure.
you know, it's just kind of those things, man. As far as those sightings go, I guess I just happened to be at the right place, the right time.
Yeah.
Maybe I saw something, maybe I didn't. Right? I'm
And
not saying I
you're
did.
into this subject too, which
Yeah.
surprises me because that's what most sightings are like for most people. They're second
Yes.
guessing themselves for weeks afterwards. Like, was it,
Yeah.
could it have been something? It seemed like a solid object, some kind.
Yeah.
Oh, an animate
And,
object.
yeah. But I try to be a little harder on myself,
Me
right? Than
too.
if
Yeah.
somebody would be telling me this, because I've, like I know what I'm supposed to be looking for and stuff, but still, it's like one of those, it's just like kind of, right then, right there, just driving along. And I think that just kind of goes to show, a little bit of the nature of this stuff. I mean,
Mm.
I've visited, gosh, dozens of these lakes with these sightings, like specifically, hoping to see something, like out kayaking into these little back channels, and just like
Yeah.
praying to God that, that I spot something, because I got my camera right here. And you never see anything, but then you're driving along, and bam, there's that, 7 seconds that,
Isn't that
you know,
funny?
a
Isn't
year
that
and a half
funny?
later, I'm second guessing myself over.
I wonder if there's some sort of law of chance that governs those kinds of sightings in the sense of I tell you, in 2012, the first time I went to Loch Ness, we had our honeymoon there, me and my wife.
Oh,
Very
wow.
understanding lady. Yeah, it's very nice, very accommodating. And it's beautiful there anyway, so it's still fun.
Yeah.
We got this 5-star sort of hotel, but it was an old style hotel. We were sitting in the dining room, looking out over onto the loch, constantly. I was always staring at the window, looking at the loch. And then 2 years later, almost to the day, 9 people in that dining room saw a big upturned boat-shaped hump
Oh,
emerge
wow.
and do a big circle right there in the loch and sink again.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
it stayed with me so long that the, I was in the right place just at the wrong time
Ex-
by 2 years,
Yeah.
significantly at the wrong time. But this weird chance, and I almost, it was a very sort of plush hotel. I'm almost certain that most of the people in there weren't there to see Nessie. They were
Yeah.
just lovely Loch Ness view, that kind of thing. And yeah, it stays with me even today. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
even when I'm at the lock, I'm always snapping back as I'm walking
Yeah.
away. Like, I see you there. I see you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just I just I mean I was really happy that I think I saw what it did, but it's like
Oh,
it would have been so much better if I would have been out there kayaking, and maybe it would have been within 30 yards of it or
yeah,
something. But even
absolutely.
then, you know big deal, right? I would have had a picture that everybody would try to debunk on Facebook, and
Sometimes it's
you know
worse to have a picture of a
yeah,
sighting. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm not saying I blame people for scrutinizing it, but as far as evidence goes, as far as skeptics, even if you give them good evidence, they're going to move the goalposts, and it's
of
just
course,
kind of the nature of things,
of
I
course.
guess.
You've got to rod that thing and net it and bring it in,
Yeah, right.
and
And
even
even
then,
then, yeah,
it's a
and then you're
dwarf
going to get in
seal.
trouble for poaching or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. And then you poach the creature.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what was the thing I was going to ask you? But what do you think about the approximate distance from the creature and a sort of rough description of any texture that you could see in
Well,
the humps, if any?
yeah, there was no way I could make out any kind of texture because so I'm on the road here, and I mean it was fairly close to shore, but there was like fairly deep bank, and then over up ahead of me there's like a house, like a real steep driveway, like a small house. So it was almost kind of
Okay.
like in like sort of like a real big inlet area, not real close to the shore. So I would guess uh 75 yards probably.
Okay.
Probably less than 100 yards, but more than 50. It's kind of it's a little harder to tell, because my car's moving at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You
And
know
would
what
you
I mean?
say sort of height and length? Any idea? I guess from height, even at
There,
75 yards, it's pretty difficult to
Yeah, I mean,
determine.
I mean, height. It looked like, let's say, it probably two to 3 feet above the
Okay.
water, about. I mean, it was very noticeable, the humps, and I would say that they were kind of spread out.
Yeah.
Maybe uh, uh, 4 to 5 feet apart, something
Okay.
like that. Yeah,
You've been pretty discreet about this, Denver, in that case, because that's
Well,
not a boat wake by any sort of definition.
I don't think so either, but
Yeah.
like without having any, without having a picture or video
Yeah.
or this or a DNA sample. It's like, who cares? This is just
Yeah.
one of thousands of reports.
Yeah.
So I didn't really make too big of a deal about it. I wrote a little piece about it on my blog and all that. But it was a cool experience for me. But as far as anybody else out there, I mean, yeah, it's just one of thousands.
Yeah, I would love it. I would love it. But I do concur with your caution there in the sense of since this has become more of a serious thing for me over the years, I'm now worried about capturing evidence. Because,
Yeah.
guy goes out to find Bigfoot, finds Bigfoot, that kind of thing. Guy goes looking for lake monsters, finds lake monster, has a book to sell just about lake
Yeah.
monsters, strangely enough.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
it all
Yeah,
ties
exactly.
in very neatly. And I
Yeah,
can
you're
imagine
you're
how
you're
people.
planting evidence. Yeah, you're just trying to sell books, so you're making
Exactly.
up stories, and yeah, I get it. And most of the people that say that they don't realize like how little the royalty checks are
Yeah,
on these
exactly.
books. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got man, I have months where like maybe you're breaking $50 or something. I
If I
mean,
was
it's
doing
just
this for money, I would have stopped a long time ago.
yeah, if it was about money, I mean, that's yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's like in your upper echelon of people there's like two or three guys or gals that are making some money, but the
Yeah.
rest of us just doing it
Even
because
those
we
guys.
we
I
enjoy
mean,
it.
it's not the most popular genre in the world, even Bigfoot.
Yeah.
It's not like ghosts or something. If you're like a ghost guy writing ghost books and you're in some building somewhere with the lights off and the night vision on, then the big bucks might start rolling in. You're looking scared there, hearing noises and feeling cold spots. But cryptozoology, I think it's just it's definitely a crime of passion. In a way.
It is, and that's even true for a lot of the paranormal
Mm,
folks. There's, like I said, there's there's a couple popular people that
Yeah,
have they have the dramatic TV shows, and then everybody else is, just out there, with a passion and with a desire to kind of learn more. And, you know, it, most of the people don't get in this stuff for money, although, it's not to say that, there aren't people making money on this,
yeah.
but not many and
More
not
power to
much.
them. I'm happy for those
Yeah,
guys. I really am.
sure.
I mean, there is a lot of money in this industry, but I found it's more normally money I'm spending, not money I make. It's a lot. It
Yeah,
does involve a lot
gas
of
money. I
money
mean,
leaving my account, and yeah, yeah. But
yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's all part of it. We do it because we love it, and that's one of the things. One of the things that was interesting you wrote about actually was the little people, like these little tribes, basically, and I had sort of I had like the Mimigwesi and things like that. I thought it was just very interesting to these little burial sites that you discovered around the place. And I know there
yeah.
were some stories about these things a long time ago, but can you tell us a little bit about these what is the evidence for these little burial yards of proto pygmies or Littlefoots or whatever it is that's been discovered out there?
Yeah, so and this is something one of these days I'm probably going to end up doing a book about it one of these days. This is one of those deals, man. I was really going kind of hard at it and got about halfway through a book, and then I just hit a mental roadblock and I
Mm,
set it down about a year ago. And you could probably relate. I don't know, but any of your listeners could probably relate that have
takes time.
done any writing. But yeah, in North America, I mean, throughout North America, your various Native American tribes, have a lot of tales of these little people, and they're in a lot of ways similar to, the little people over, in your neck of the woods over that way, or in the in Hawaii. It's sort of I guess kind of a universal sort of thing. But
Mm,
the interesting thing here, at least, like in the 1800s, early 1800s, around 1820s, especially in Tennessee, like around White County, Tennessee, not too far from Nashville, there were just all these discoveries of what they would call pygmy graveyards. I mean, just tons and tons and tons of these skeletal finds of these, little people. And, of course, the skeptics, say they're children and this and that. But in a lot of the writings, they talked about how the skulls, fully formed. They had adult teeth, they did,
mm.
all things like that, where they could, where that they could tell that these were, adult skeletons that, would have stood, less than 4 feet tall in a
Wow.
lot of cases. And, you had a lot of those discoveries, like I said, in Tennessee, um,
Wow.
up into Kentucky a little bit, out in Ohio. There were, a lot of those stories, maybe not a lot of the stories, some old, documented reports from around the late 1800s in Ohio, even out in South Dakota. And I know a lot of people are familiar with the fact that across North America, 1800s, are tons of reports and old histories of giant skeletons, but a lot of people don't know about these pygmy skeletal finds. And I think it's real interesting. And of course, it's totally written off as a hoax by the mainstream. But I don't know. I'm just always kind of prone to look into things like
Mm.
that. I don't. I just don't think we know as much as we think we know,
No,
whether it be
definitely
about our natural world, the animals that are living in our world, or our history. I tend to think, in a lot of ways, our history books are full of crap. I think.
Oh, that's something we definitely experience here. Yeah, to give an example of that, in Britain, you hear about the Romans, which who came and invaded the island. Even in their own words, they talk about taking the island from the Celts. and they couldn't, defeat the Proto-Scots or the Picts or whoever were there at that time. And then suddenly you hear about the Saxons, the Anglo-Saxons, and that's like it's almost like 5 centuries later. Nothing about the Celts in between. It's just
Yeah.
like, it's just that Romans got here, and then Saxons got here, and then it was England, Britain, so on and so forth, the Vikings, and it's just really odd because most of the island or the large parts of it is still really very Celtic places in a way, but that part of the history is just conveniently missed out.
Yeah.
And it seems a strange thing, really. And I guess I know people say history is written by the winners, but I think there's something a bit more than that. It's written for the majority audience that's going to read it as well. So I think
Yeah.
from a point of sort of England being a dominant nation here, that's the majority audience
Yeah.
that would read that historically. And so it's strange how that happens.
Yeah.
But
And
these
no, I was just going to say, not only is history written in certain ways, but then you've got, and you're seeing this now in real time
Yeah.
where you're having history suppressed. So like
Yes.
and you're really seeing that these days. Like it's a little easier now with the click or a tweak of an algorithm. You can just
Yeah.
bury search results, and so, but that same sort of thing has always went on. It just wasn't via computer with algorithms.
That's why I
But
always
yeah,
keep
I mean,
paper. I always keep books.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I think that would be very interesting as well. But I wonder why, at the time when these proto-pygmies were discovered, that people wouldn't have been very interested scientifically in them. It's a strange thing. You say that if they were just under 4 feet, well, a lot of the pygmies in the Congo were around about 4 feet tall, less in many cases.
yeah.
And really scientifically, we've got no problem accepting that. So it's strange to me, to think of the reasons they might have had for hiding the evidence or just ignoring it. Do you have any theories about that?
I'm really not sure because especially in the earlier part of the 1800s, it was kind of widely accepted, like about these giants and things. I mean, people pretty much believed in it, because you had a more sort of like a Bible believing population
Yeah.
in the U.S. then. So they kind of took for granted that, yes, there
Okay.
were giants because it is in the Bible. But why they wouldn't, not really sure why why there wasn't the interest in these pygmy skeletons. I don't know if maybe because it wasn't as widespread. I'm not sure. But by the 1860s and 70s, there were people taking interest in this and doing research, measuring bones and reporting their findings and that sort of thing. But the sort of the powers that be, like the Smithsonian, those kind of people were they were very hostile to it. I mean, and I've got some of these stories, on my website that just writing like, just scathing, nasty things about the the guys that were bringing this sort of thing to light. So I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it just
I wonder if there's
just
a
didn't
sort of
really
P.T.
fit.
Barnum effect or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
it's hard to say. I mean, I don't really have a good answer for that. I mean, I know why now, because nowadays it's the science is already settled for everything. It seems like and you're not allowed to really ask any sort of questions these days without
Oh yeah, we're in
making
that
something mad.
science is settled period, which is a very strange thing. It's a very unscientific thing to say, oddly.
Seems kind of
Um,
weird.
yeah, it's kind of because I mean, I suppose it can't be settled exactly because it's the same in medicine stuff. Most of what you do, diagnosis is exclusions. You exclude things. You find out what it isn't to
Yeah.
find out what it is. And it's I'm sure it's very much the same with many scientific investigations as well. Um, Talking about the pygmies and proto-pygmies, I think that's amazing to think that there could have been people like that around at the time, and it also makes sense in the sense of in old times, and it was one of my theories that I looked at for Europe as well. When communities become insular for long periods of time, certain recessive traits
Yeah.
are more common. And I was thinking of the Vedoma people, in Africa, with the ostrich, the bird-footed people. They're not allowed to marry outside the tribe, and so these weird deformities of the feet getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and you develop something quite unusual. What would these guys have been described as 300 years ago?
Yeah.
Creatures, or half man, half beast. And perhaps that was the same with some shorter um, tribes of people. But what about the giants? Because that's another aspect. North America is full of histories of giants. Have you, and I know you've been going around and finding various ancient glyph sites around the place as well, and rock art sites. Is there some sort of connection with that? Are they portrayed, some of the ancient glyphs in rock art, or is it just something that's spoken of through the 19th century explorers and Native American legend?
Well, I think, as far as petroglyphs, things like that go, I haven't really seen them, so much depicted through petroglyphs. But what I have noticed is a lot of the petroglyphs out west here. Yeah, a lot of the humanoid figures will have like six fingers, or they'll be barefooted, right, and have six toes. So if you think back to the Bible, it talks about how Goliath's brothers, each had six fingers on each hand, so, six 24 digits, it says in the Bible. And so that seems to be kind of a thing with a lot of your giant lore, really just worldwide, how there's the reports of the extra digits,
Mm.
I think it is kind of interesting that there's a lot of petroglyphs and rock carvings that show that, like in North
Wow.
Carolina, the Judico Rock, not far from the Cherokee land, this massive boulder. It's got like a seven-fingered handprint where the
Wow.
giant leapt off the mountain and used the rock
Mm.
to steady himself, and left this seven-fingered handprint. So I think it's
Wow.
interesting, those that trait, those extra digits. And I saw one pretty cool petroglyph in Utah, and this, I mean, this is like the figure is really probably like 4 or 5 feet tall, but it's this really good humanoid figure. And I mean, and you can tell it's not, it looks like a person. It's not one of those
Mm.
like real weird things. And he's got like
Oh
a
yeah.
like a sword across his back. But
Wow.
it's interesting. He's got these just enormously disproportionate feet. And a lot of I've seen a lot of Bigfoot researchers, kind
Mm.
of lump that in like, oh, there's evidence of Bigfoot. I don't really think that, just because he's got big feet, that it's pointing to a Bigfoot, because it looks just like a person. I've never
Yeah.
heard any Bigfoot reports where he's carrying a sword around or thing.
Sword and looks just
you,
like a
you know.
person. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what is interesting about that petroglyph, though, is that at least on his hands, I don't think I could really tell on its feet how many toes it has, but the hands,
Mm.
six fingers. So
Ah.
what this is just my own kooky little theory. I think that they were trying to show that this guy was a giant, right? Because
Yeah.
he's got the five hands. I think
That's
the
the
the big
marker.
exaggerated feet were probably showing
Mm.
that he left these big tracks, where he walked, that sort of thing. So, I think that that's sort of some anecdotal evidence, maybe,
Well,
for for
it's
some of those
definitely
ancient.
correlation.
Yeah, I
I'm
think so.
assuming Native Americans at that time had no idea of the Goliath story or the story of the defeat of his brothers, which most Christians aren't really very aware of either. That the
Yeah,
six-fingered, double-row teeth that the siblings of his had. It was from a family of giants, and it's strange to me that that would be repeated in a very disparate culture from a different background religion, essentially.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
interesting. It's definitely
yeah.
interesting. But I mean, what I have, what I have done a lot of as far as the giants go is, I visit a lot of these mound sites throughout
Mm.
especially in the Ohio Valley, where supposed giant bones have been discovered, and there's not really, this all happened so long ago. These mounds are, a lot of them are even destroyed, or some of them have been reconstructed. So, it's not like you can really investigate anything now, as far as bringing anything new to light. But it's still kind of like to put my feet on the ground in these
Yeah,
places.
and see
You know,
the location of these
yeah,
things.
yeah,
So
yeah.
before it is destroyed, you mean that uh, treasure hunters, I guess, dug them up, or 19th century archaeologists sort of emptied the tombs to see what was in there? Were they
Yeah,
tombs? Did they find tombs there in that
yeah,
time, or was it?
yeah. You had both of that going on, and yeah, and in a lot of the cases, the people were buried like laying down, and then they just build successive
Okay,
burials and mounds over top. But in some cases there's actual like vaults and
okay,
tombs inside these mounds,
yeah,
and that was usually reserved for what would appear to be like probably royalty, right?
mm,
Because a lot of times it'd be like a 7.5 foot skeleton,
yeah,
sometimes with like copper crowns, that sort of thing, and sometimes it'd have like even smaller skeletons in there with them. That was kind of something the ancients used to do. Is the leader would die, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
guess a
yeah.
bunch
That's
of
right.
his or her favorite people have to get
And
buried
you'd have
with
a
him.
pretty good incentive to make sure they made it,
I guess so.
right?
But yeah, so they would have these and some of these really large mounds, they'd have these vaults, and these actual tombs in some of them, not all of them, but some of them. And yeah, and a lot of them were destroyed too. Probably the bulk of them were destroyed, not even by treasure hunters or things like that, but just as we push west, people were just plowing them up, to
Yeah.
cultivate crops, things
Oh,
like
you mean
that.
just to use the land, essentially,
Yeah,
flatten the land
exactly.
out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just for land usage. Yeah, yeah, and even in
Wow.
even in fairly recent times, I mean, I think that they're
Isn't
yep.
there some sort of prohibition or archaeological uh, law that's protecting these sites?
Well, nowadays, I guess there kind of is, and it's probably you know more like on the local level. But I do know, I want to say over in Kentucky, not too many years ago, maybe like 20 years ago, I think a mound was demolished
Wow.
to put in a like a Walmart parking lot,
Wow.
but
Yeah.
they are a whole lot more protected
Yeah.
these days. Just like in my home state of Virginia, right? That's one of the first 13 colonies, and a lot of people don't even know that there used to be tons of mounds in Virginia,
Wow.
but uh, you know they started getting tore up a long, long time ago. So, there's not
Yeah.
even, records anymore of a lot of that stuff. So it's really sad what,
Yeah.
happened to a lot of that.
I try to think of this stuff sometimes, especially in view of what people did in the past from this practical sort of point of view. We didn't really have that, well, not especially anyway, that idea of preserving things and looking back on this history for many many years,
Yeah.
and something was on your land and you needed it. There was no sort of award that went to, or a sort of compensation for keeping it intact. You
Yeah.
just kind of got rid of it. I'd even imagine
Yeah.
probably things like Stonehenge would have been torn down if they had not been valuable to people, or they just it wasn't in anybody's way. It wasn't a viable piece of land, I guess, for farming or whatever else that took place.
Yeah.
And it's a strange thing. There are many mounds here, by the way, that have never been touched in the
Yeah.
UK. Many, many mounds. But even things aren't built over. I mean, remember the king we discovered below the car park, Richard III, who was buried below. I forget the name of the store, but they had to do some works, I think. on this car park. They were expanding, something weird like that, and they found the bones in this look, I suppose very particular royal-looking burial site, and dug it up, and they found one of his surviving ancestors and did DNA tests and realized it was Richard III, a king that had been defeated in battle here. So they call him the king under the car park. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So I guess it happens all the time, and of course, a country like
Yeah.
this, it's just people buried all over the place. The big railway that
Yeah.
we're building at the moment through London and up into the north, they're just digging up people from the plague and everything constantly, all the time, non-stop.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of
I imagine
strange.
there's a lot of unmarked graves up there with, from the plague and that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. And every time they find skeletons or a new batch of skeletons, the archaeologists have got to come in and stop everything, give them the approval before they can carry on,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. They do that here now.
Yeah,
Like, if they're putting a road or something
yeah.
through and, like an old body or whatever comes up, they'll have archaeologists come
Mm.
in and then they'll try to figure out, who it belongs to and, if the project needs to stop this or that. So yeah, there's also a lot of incentive for like developers and stuff to, maybe to not say anything
Well,
if
this is the thing, 'cause I think you have to foot the bill often. It's here, if you buy a property in the UK, like an old church, a lot of old churches or chapels become converted into houses because there's just so many of them.
yeah.
And you start digging or doing works, and then you find bones beneath the floor. And oftentimes that is the case because the clergy would have been buried on the premises.
Hmm.
It's very special people within the premises, and that would be marked out. Then not only do the archaeologists have to come in, you often have to foot the bill for the works. And at least that used to be the rule. And you don't even get to keep, whatever's found. That's taken off as a
Oh
national.
man.
Yeah, as a part of the, it's owned, I suppose, by the country's antiquities or whatever archaeological. I don't know the exact law, but it's a strange thing. So I think if I ever bought one of these old chapels, I wouldn't do anything. Curtains, maybe. Say
Yeah.
curtains.
Don't blame you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. What about, I mean, you do so much on water monsters, but I was very interested in, and I'm very interested at the moment in these freshwater octopus sightings. I know the Oklahoma octopus is one of them, but there are also versions of that in South America, freshwater octopus, or something that appears to be octopus-like. Is it called the Cuervo or
Yeah, yeah. What is it? Cuero? Yeah.
Cuero?
Which
Are they
I
mainly?
think, yeah, I think in Spanish that I think it translates to like cowhide or
Oh,
something like
cowhide.
that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think is, yeah. That's kind of one of those weird things in some of those Chilean and Patagonian lakes. This this creature. It's like if you want to debunk it, it almost sounds like a large freshwater stingray. The
Mm.
problem is they
Uh,
don't have those there.
yeah.
The freshwater stingrays. That's in the warm tropical waters, not in those cold
Mm.
glacial waters. But yeah, this thing is. Some accounts they got kind of like tentacles, and other accounts they have like these claws on
Claws
along
sort of
kind of
hide.
like running
Mm.
along the edge of their
Huh.
body, and supposedly they just sort of like I guess a good word would be like envelop their victims. Like, something will come up close to the water and they're just, just kind of like envelop them.
Oh,
And I
so
guess,
they
those,
take it from the land. They grab the creature from the land.
yeah,
Or
I've read a few of those, like, like if somebody's like up real, or like, like a dog
wow,
or
goodness.
small cow,
Yeah.
something like that. Just kind of like come up from under the water or sand and just
Wow.
so yeah, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about
Mm.
those reports. It's kind of there's not a whole lot to go on, and especially
Mm.
if you don't speak Spanish, going through a lot of that old folklore and stuff. But it does have, I guess, a little similarity to some of those things you hear like about the Oklahoma octopus,
Mm.
and I've always sort of not been a big believer in the Oklahoma octopus,
Yeah.
those tales.
Why is that?
I
Is that there's something about the story that just seems a bit off, or what's the word?
yeah,
Like canonical in a way, sort of like a local folk tale.
yeah, because like when I first really started looking into it, like everything you would read, like kind of pointed back to the same stories.
Okay.
And then when you go back far enough, you can kind of trace it. I don't know if you remember that. I don't even know if you had it over there, but we got that Animal Planet over here in the U.S. and they used to have
Sure.
this show Lost Tapes,
Oh
where
yeah,
they would do these
yeah.
dramatizations, and it
Yeah.
was just acting. It would
Mostly
it
made
would
up.
have like a
Yeah.
yeah, it would have like a cool
Mm.
cryptozoology story, but I mean, it was all acting, and
Yeah.
I mean, and a lot of it was like you said, just outright made up. And they did one that was like about the Oklahoma octopus, and
Ah.
basically there were these teenagers out on the lake, and the octopus kept like picking them off one by one, and
Oh
like
yeah.
one
Okay.
like one girl, I think it's a girl got away, and said that she had like these
Oh,
like
sucker
big
marks. Yeah. Yeah.
suction cup places all over,
Yeah.
and like everything you looked at like kind of went back to that. But I think that show was really created in response because there were, I want to say like around 2005 2007 time frame, there was like a really sharp uptick in drownings in a few of the lakes down there.
Okay.
And I think that kind of came as a result of those drownings and
Yeah.
things. And like in one of those drownings, a little boy was I want to say he was 7. uh, Said that like that something had his leg, and like he was screaming and like something was pulling him down. And so I've always thought that maybe a better explanation for rather than a freshwater octopus
Mm.
in a man-made lake, that doesn't really even make a whole lot of sense, really.
Mm.
But I always thought maybe it's just like a really big catfish, because
Yeah.
a kid, out swimming in a murky lake, is,
They will often just go
toad
for something.
kicking
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can mimic bait fish, and
Yeah.
catfish, might just, you know, chomped onto his leg and
Yeah.
just like pulled down and he drowned, I think. So I think that might have been more to do with it. And you know, and again, and the other thing too is like, yeah, you've got a few lakes that have a sharp uptick in drownings, right? But you're not like, say if you had 4 drownings, and you double it to 100%, right? I mean, that's still 8. That's 8 drownings. It's not like enough to me to
That's the sort of a
you know
strange phenomenon, though, isn't it? That we often, and especially in ancient societies, but we do it now as well. I always was confused that for instance, the first Mothman sort of sightings were all linked to these accidents on this bridge, and actually, you
yeah
don't hear a lot about the sightings themselves. Just that there was something seen, and then these accidents took place, like an omen, and that sounds very folkloric to me. Like, actually, there were a lot of accidents, and then I wonder, does the folkloric explanation come afterwards? I was looking into the book quiz, for example, and you can't really find any sightings. It's just associated with drowning and children and the rest of it. And I wonder if there's
yeah
something in our psyche or something in ancient cultures as well that has to make up a sort of a boogeyman for when tragedy strikes. And then
yeah
we
I mean
start, creating these creatures that must have taken people away, or even as a cautionary tale for other
yeah
children to stay away from that situation.
yeah I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I guess I mean, if you think about it, it's guess it's a lot easier to accept that this weird octopus creature
Yeah.
drowned kid, and the kid was just out having fun on a summer day, and
Mm,
boom, and, you know,
yeah,
now he or she is dead. I mean, that's
it's
I don't know. I
terrifying. Yeah.
guess I kind of like the octopus story better, right?
Yeah, I mean, drowning is actually apparently not very pleasant at all. I'd definitely be munched up by a giant octopus to
Yeah,
drown. That's embarrassing.
yeah,
At least it wasn't my
yeah.
fault. Um, when it happened to him, he drowned, right? No, 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 you don't understand. This guy was taken by a huge freshwater octopus.
Yeah,
He fought
that's
hard,
a
but
better.
he was outgunned. Not his fault. Um, that kind of, I think, leads me on to the South American water monsters, sort of straight into that. Things like the Nahuelito, and his cousins, spread out throughout the South American continent. So that must have been very hard for you to research for a start. Most of the articles I find, let's say, are in Spanish. They're very
Yeah.
difficult to pick apart. What do you think about what's the background? What's the likelihood that this has originated, before Loch Ness became a thing? And do you think it's real?
Yeah, it's it's hard to say. I mean, a lot of the I did see some of those lake monster reports from Patagonia. Supposedly, went back to like 1910, 1920, before really Nessie became so popular. But the bulk of them, they are after. But um, I really don't have a problem believing, at least in those Patagonian lakes, that there's something in there, because they're like the same type of lakes, like Loch Ness, or like Lake Champlain, or these other lakes. The real deep glacial lakes is just where you get the bulk of these reports, and the descriptions of the creatures sounds pretty darn close, with the
Really similar.
exception of like the Cuero that we were
Mm.
talking about a minute ago. That's just sort of its own thing, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it just seems like that there's just these prehistoric holdovers to
Mm.
me that are still kind of hanging out in some of these lakes. That's just kind of what I think.
I've been on that page for a long time, but it is not a popular opinion. But I just can't see how the bulk of the descriptive sightings, at least anywhere that where there's a body and a long neck involved, it's
Yeah.
just, what else could you possibly put this on? There's nothing
Yeah.
else you can
And,
put it on, and it's not evidence. I know that, but it's anecdotal
right.
evidence is the bulk of what we go on. So,
Well, yeah, and for me, like, and this is a very unpopular opinion, but for me, whether we're talking Bigfoot, or whether we're talking these water monsters, yeah, the eyewitness reports, I get all of the problems with eyewitness testimony. I totally understand. But that to me is the best evidence, and
that's
will
what, yeah.
always be the best evidence that there's something out
Mm,
there. And the reason for that, because if you just say that that's not evidence, well, then what are you left with? You're left with everyone, like for Bigfoot, everybody's either making it up, or
yeah,
they're mistaking a black bear that
yeah,
stood up, or
yeah,
these water monsters, right? Everybody's either making it up, they're lying, or it's just waves and logs. I just can't believe that. So to me, the eyewitness accounts, that's number one for me. I'm sorry, it
yeah.
just is. And I just kind of go from there. Like, when somebody does come across an impressive Bigfoot track, or you do see a really good lake monster picture that you
Mm.
just can't really debunk,
Mm.
that only adds to it for me. I guess I'm just kind of wired to believe that people are having these encounters.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, definitely. I think there's also this problem where people conflate proof with evidence. No, it's not proof. Eyewitness reports are not proof, but they are evidence.
Yes.
They are evidence. Otherwise, we would never have eyewitness testimony in law cases. It's
Yeah.
not conclusive proof, but it's definitely still evidence. It's always
Yeah.
admitted as evidence. And I think sort of a big conflict that goes on all the time. Oh, well, that's not evidence. You can't admit it or submit it. And that's the mistake. Yes, we can. It's soft evidence, but it's still evidence.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, if you got 15 people and, they all point to the same guy that snatched this lady's purse, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
evidence. You
That's
you
damning
use that in
evidence.
court.
Yeah.
And you got 15 people seeing the same thing, but
Yeah.
when 15 people see these humps out on a lake, it's, oh no, it was a log, or even if they
Yeah.
describe seeing the neck or head, oh no, it was a mass hallucination, or I mean, the debunkers will just come up with all kinds of, some of the explanations they come up with are way more crazy than
Yeah,
just a
actually,
plesiosaur in the water.
I've always said that some of the explanations are much
It's
further out,
crazy.
really far. The
Yeah.
mass hallucination one, and that's really crazy because
Yeah.
people having even individuals having hallucinations is very rare. That somebody
Yeah.
suffers from hallucinations, and actually you're having a psychotic episode of a kind. It's really
Yeah.
serious. Like 15 to 20 people seeing exactly the same thing. Now I know the power of suggestion and all of that, but it has to have a starting point.
Yes.
Not just that somebody influential in the crowd says, "Look, can you see that thing?" And you get all kinds of different reports. So somebody said they could see it. I could see what looked like a mat of vegetables. I wasn't sure, that kind of thing. Not, we all saw this thing. We all watched it for
Yeah.
10 minutes, swim about the place. That
Yeah.
that's where the hallucinations are stretch, I think, absolutely. But
Yeah.
I understand about the wakes and the seals and everything else. That's pretty reasonable. And of course, in our
Yeah.
current climate, and we have this thing with Loch Ness at the moment with the cameras. There's a guy sitting, on his laptop at home watching one of the cameras and reporting sightings to the newspapers every week. And I think he's on 17 or 18 at the moment. And there's people who've actually said, look, we found out there were kayaks at that point at that time. It's like a quarter mile from the loch, this cam. Or there were people in a boat at that time, and you literally just can't make out any detail, and the papers
Yeah.
lap it up, and I think that adds to
It
the um
does.
the support that eyewitnesses are
Yeah.
unreliable.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah. It
issue.
it it does for sure. Yeah, it does. And I there's a guy that kind of friends with on Twitter, and I think he just like sits at home and just watches that camera all the time, and he'll always send me screenshots, and
Yeah,
I don't want to hurt his feelings, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's interesting, man. 'Cause some of them are interesting, but it's just that it's like,
yeah,
without any more context, it's kind of hard to tell.
yeah.
And back to like your eyewitness stuff, whether it's Bigfoot or whether it's lake monsters or UFOs for that matter. I mean maybe up to 90% of this stuff is explainable with like a mundane
Sure.
explanation. I'm not saying that, but what about that 10%? What about that 5%? And it
Even if it's
only
one,
takes one. If one person sees one plesiosaur, then oh my goodness, we got that's
exactly,
it only
exactly,
takes one.
exactly. I am working currently on submitting a law to the Scottish Parliament that everybody traveling around the loch must be fitted with automatic cameras all over their body at all times, reporting
That's awesome.
to the cloud.
I'll
That'd be great.
co-sign that. That's awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll have to develop some sort of algorithm to sort out the good from the bad. Yeah, I mean, well, look, that's amazing. For me, lake monsters, I'm with you. It's the most plausible thing because of the inability to investigate those areas. For the average layman as well, who would be involved, like us, involved in these kinds of things. Let's move away from that more into the sort of slightly paranormal side. Things like the skinwalker and Wendigo. Could there be, could there be a flesh and blood um, explanation for some of those things, or do you think this is something that's either purely paranormal or purely some weird European, or let's say, Western interpretation of tribal folklore. It's something that we've taken on now and sort of run with. That's far away from the original native uh, depiction of the creature.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I come down on these. As far as the Wendigo goes, it's getting really popular and like on Facebook, things like that. But I just do not believe that there's a cryptid creature that's 10 feet tall with antlers on its head. Yeah, I just don't believe that at all. And if you really go back and read those stories, yeah, to me, the Wendigo sounds like a clear case of, and this would depend on what you believe. If you're more scientific minded, it would be like an actual mental illness or psychosis.
Uh-huh.
If you got more like a conservative Christian background, kind of like I do, to me it sounds like a clear cut case of demonic possession.
Mm.
That and it seems to sort of like what a lot of the Native Americans that had these tales, like this spirit would
Okay.
enter these
Yeah.
people, right? And then they would crave human flesh. It's
Mm.
like the spirit of the Wendigo would kind of take them over. In no way I just do not believe in the Wendigo as a cryptid. Not a
Yeah.
real popular opinion with a lot of folks, but and I don't dismiss that there's weird things, but I think it's either cases of like mental illness,
Mm. So like
like a
almost a pre-scientific explanation, tribal explanation for mental illness and psychological disorders. Or is
yeah,
it?
yeah, possibly, but I do believe, and even a lot of I'm not like a devout Christian or anything, but I do have those old teachings, and
Yeah.
so I do believe that demons, whatever you want, malevolent entities,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them, I do believe that is real
I believe
in
that
a
too.
sense. I
Yeah.
don't think that everybody acting crazy is necessarily
No.
possessed by a demon, but I think that can and does
Yeah.
sort of happen from time to time. So I think that you might kind of like have a little bit of a combination there, but as far as just this antlered, you know emaciated
Yeah.
thing, I just
Well, it
don't
sounds
buy
like
it.
a hallucination, doesn't it, in a way? And
Yeah, I mean, I just don't buy it. There's no evidence for it as far as it being a physical creature, none whatsoever, really.
no.
And the eyewitness reports you do get, it's just a real smattering of sightings.
Yeah. And a real hodgepodge sort of
Yeah,
patchwork quilt kind of creature,
yeah, yeah,
right? Yeah.
and
Could it be
yeah, and
anything to
like
do with the ergo fungus? In the same way that some of the werewolf scares in Europe were based upon this ergo poisoning. This say almost fire when they would, to bark like wolves almost, and have these terrible, sort of, I suppose, wig outs, within the whole village and eating this tainted wheat. Could that have happened, I suppose, to these people with something similar,
well,
to bring about these situations?
yeah, I suppose it's possible, or all the Wendigo tales is really like a real the way I understand it's like kind of a cultural way of
Mm.
uh, delving into the universal taboo of eating human
Yeah.
flesh,
Okay.
and different people or different cultures kind of tackle it different ways, but
Yeah.
and I think that there is that deal on I mean, I've read about it. I'm not real not real good at explaining it, but like if you eat human brains, there's something in there that can sort of drive you like crazy and
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
I forget how it all works. Forgive me for that, but there's like a protein that's like if you
Okay.
consume human brains that it's
That would essentially.
can kind of make you like go crazy sort of.
Okay, that's interesting.
So I don't, I
Yeah.
if I knew we were talking about it, I would have wrote a wrote a couple of
No, no,
things.
no, that's fine. It sort of
But
popped into my head there,
yeah,
actually. I mean, I
yeah,
don't, obviously, I don't understand that at all. It's a great, it's obviously a very terrible thing to consume anything like that, and I would agree with that. But also, even if morally I wasn't against it, I mean, knowing the humans that I've known, who would want to eat those guys?
no, I'm right there with you. That's just
Stinkers.
gross. I mean,
Yeah.
I could think of just about anything I'd eat before
Well,
that.
anything.
And that's that's really a taboo, kind of a universal taboo. I guess there's some cultures that will engage in it, more or less, for other reasons. I think some will eat the human flesh not as a way like a meal or nothing. It's meant to be evil, but like in their funerary customs, that sort of
Oh, I've
thing.
heard a few bits like
But
this. Yeah.
but
It used to be common to
yeah,
cook and eat the placenta in some cultures after birth,
yeah,
and
I've that
that
too.
to
That's pretty.
me, when I first
Yeah,
heard that, I was like, wow.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. When I first heard that, I
Yeah,
remembered, when my first child was born, and
yeah.
that, I was okay till I saw the saw the placenta come out, and I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
God, that's the most gross thing I've
it's
ever seen
really
in my life.
gross. Yeah.
It's
It's because
almost
at that
past.
point you think you've seen the worst of it, I think.
No,
And
no, it's
then,
like, but wait, there's more.
wait, there's something else that you weren't expecting. They didn't tell you about in
Oh,
the Lamars or the whatever classes that you
oh,
went to with your partner. And
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
get
My
used to
my
this
knees
now.
waffled when I hit.
It just, well, I wondered, in some, I always think it needs must in some cultures. So do these things come from a time when um, a superstition is created about such things to make the necessity for that protein consumption feasible? The same with sort of like things
Yeah,
becoming delicacies. Most of the delicacies I've ever tasted have always been really horrific, like a complete, a complete
yeah,
taste like horror show. I think this thing is called a delicacy because nobody would eat it willingly,
yeah,
and somebody just managed to, to charge a lot of money for even things like caviar, just like salt
yeah,
jelly,
yeah. It's
salt
not.
jelly balls. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. Nope.
it's the worst thing. Yeah. I know I've had you on for ages, but I just want to talk about the Bigfoot thing because, of course, everybody talks about that, and you've been all about the place, all over the country. Have you been checking in on sort of Bigfoot sightings and legends or stories in the locales that you've been visiting? And you were in Florida recently, so that's a great Bigfoot country, of course,
Yeah.
Skunk Ape country. Any sort of update on that? What did you find?
Yeah, well, what I do try to do is, no matter where I'm at, I try to get out out in the wilderness as much as I can. I spend a lot of times outdoors, spend a whole lot of times in the wilderness, and really, I mean, I don't wouldn't really consider myself a Bigfoot researcher, but I do kind of do some research, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I, I, uh, I really just kind of like to get out in the wilderness and just see what I can find. I don't do these nighttime deals like a lot of people do. I don't do these calls. I mean, I'm on the fence if Bigfoot would really even be nocturnal, right? Because they should have eyes more like us. If they're moving
Yeah.
around at night, it's probably because people are, maybe they're close to a population
Okay.
center and they're
Okay.
moving more at night because
Oh,
that's
so
when
it's
the
like we're
people
getting
are.
activity, but it's just them getting the hell out of there.
That's what I think. That's just my own opinion,
Yeah.
not a popular opinion. Everybody thinks Bigfoot's nocturnal. I
Yeah.
get it, but they should have eyes and vision comparable to
Mhm.
us. If there's not a full moon out, they're not going to be able to see any better than we can. So I don't think that night is for
Yeah.
me, really the best time. And plus, I think I approach Bigfoot like I did. I don't hunt anymore, but I used to back in my 20s. And teen years and into my early 30s. I was an avid hunter, real into bow hunting. And I kind of approach it like I did that. I just try to sneak through the woods as quiet as I can, being as observant as I can, sit down, let my noise settle down. And I think people doing these night things, soon as you get your flashlight out, right? A Bigfoot can see that for miles and miles and miles. So that's another reason.
That's a
I
bad
think I can
signal right
kind of
there.
exactly. I think I can just, and especially if you got a group of people, right? And they got their flashlights going, and a lot of times they got their cameras going, and this and that. So for me, I just don't understand the whole night thing, but that's just me. But yeah, I like to just get out in the woods, look around, see what I can find. I spent a lot of time down in Florida, this winter here, and it's mostly kind of concentrating around the green swamp area, which is just a huge tract of preserved land down there with tons of sightings. And I had a deal down there that was kind of like my my Flathead Lake monster thing. I think I saw something, but I'm even like less
Less
convinced
sure.
than with the
I
yeah.
suppose
But I mean,
thick foliage doesn't really help for
yeah.
clarification.
I was like way back in there, I'd probably hike about 3 or 4 miles, back in there, and really the green swamp. A lot of people think about it. It's actually mostly dry land. A swamp is kind of a misnomer. It's mostly dry land, but is a lot of standing waters. There's alligators. It's so thick. It's really hard
Cougars,
to.
bears, things like that.
Yeah. There's all you name it, it's back there. Big feral hog population, black bears, all that. But I I just kind of like stopped along a trail and just getting a drink of water, and I just like out of the corner of my eye, there's like this palmetto prairie. And for anybody overseas that doesn't really understand what that is, it's just these short, like kind of like a small palm tree, but they're real short. They got these serrated, jaggy leaves, and they call them palmetto prairies because it's just as far as you can see these things. But then there'll be like real thick, jungly woods, like right on the edges of them. So like on the edge of one of those, I just saw something, man, just like out of the corner of my eye, and it looked, it looked it's like at a 3/4 position. So I saw like the back of its head. It didn't look like it had a neck.
Wow.
Kind of
Hairy? It looked hairy?
like looked like reddish hairy. And I just saw it for a few seconds, and then it's like it just kind of just like sort of ducked in that real thick woods. And
So it can't be a black bear. It's the wrong color to start.
I mean, some black bears do have reddish,
But
do
we're
have,
talking red like
but
auburn or red like ginger.
well, I would say like a blackish red, like
Okay,
what
like
would
an
that be,
auburn.
like a auburn? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like when the light hits a black bear, if you got the sun on it real good, it will have like a red, and plus, like black bears, there can be like light brown ones. There can be almost blonde ones. That's kind of the exception, but they do have variations in their colors. But with what I saw, it didn't have like the big, like bears have big heads, and they got like these, little round ears that if it were, like standing up and, but I mean, maybe it was that because I went through after I got a drink of water, I kind of cut through that palmetto prairie. I mean, it's just real thick and just hard to walk through. I get over there and the ground was really too hard over in the woods there. It's, for couldn't really find any
Oh,
tracks.
so you
There
checked
wasn't
out the
any
spot
mud
and
or
everything. You went
anything.
to where you just
Yeah,
seen it
there
and
wasn't
checked
any
it out.
mud or nothing. And then like over like if it had come from that palmetto prairie, I mean, it was so thick you couldn't make anything out.
Okay.
And I don't know. I didn't find moral of the story. I didn't find any tracks. I didn't get any pictures. So
You saw
whatever.
something bipedal and
Maybe I
hairy
saw
from a
something.
distance turn away from you. And the interesting thing about that, I was very surprised to know that, you know, that Florida has one of the highest densities of, Bigfoot sightings in the US,
Yeah,
allegedly.
it's
Yeah,
I think it's if you're using the Bigfoot field researchers, if
yeah,
you're using their database as a gauge, they're
yeah,
number three, I want to say. I mean, number
yeah,
one is like Washington State, and I
yeah.
think two is either Oregon or California, and then Florida's number three. But I really
Oh,
think
makes
that, and I'm not,
sense.
well, there, a lot of people don't realize that you think of Florida and you think of 300-mile strip malls along each coast.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and, and there's a lot of truth to that, but even in those real populated areas, there's a lot of preserved land. And then
yeah,
when you get in the middle of the state, I mean, it ain't nothing but orange groves,
yeah.
cattle ranches, and like thick jungly swamps. I
You
mean,
got that
there is so
whole
much.
Everglades part as well. I mean,
Oh,
it's
the Everglades is
yeah.
just, and it's impenetrable. Like
Mm,
if you get off a trail and try walking through that stuff,
yeah,
well, you need to have on some, rubber boots, waders, and you
yeah.
still just, trudging through that stuff. I
It's
mean, it's almost,
alligator
uh,
country as well.
yeah,
You
there's
and there's
alligators.
gigantic pythons and
Yeah,
uh,
you
do they have
got
water
all that.
moccasins and things like that
Oh
there?
yeah, yeah. There's like six species.
Rattlesnakes.
Yeah, they got rattlesnakes. They got pygmy rattlesnakes,
Uh,
water moccasins, copperheads. They got like six venomous snakes. I mean, it's
okay,
yeah, like
sounds
Florida's
lovely.
like the closest thing to Australia, I guess.
Yeah, everything there
You know,
wants to
with
kill
all
you.
the, like everything
Absolutely.
wants to kill you, down
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
But
It does seem like the Wild West down there, actually. I've been very
yeah,
interested in that place for a long time. I've spent one day there, or a night and a day. First time I came to the US, there was a storm, one of the big storms in the Atlantic, and I was heading to New York, and they diverted us to Florida, and I stayed in a hotel overnight, in Orlando,
yeah,
uh, the next day. But I was just shocked by two things. The first was the sheer amount of, even from the airport, like wet land, like
yeah,
ponds and pools and trees everywhere. That was in a populated place like
yeah.
Orlando. But also that when I got off the little shuttle from the airport there and the doors opened, and I think that was my first experience. I came from the plane straight into immigration, then out. It was like somebody, sorry, got a hot towel and just shoved it in my face, like
Yeah,
a
it's
wet hot
brutally
towel.
hot. It's so humid and so
So
hot.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think I you're talking about how and a lot of people think this that it doesn't really make a lot of sense for all the Bigfoot sightings in Florida because you really think of I mean if you're thinking Bigfoot most people are thinking Pacific Northwest and Western Canada and I get that but I think what comes to play with Florida a lot and I'm not saying that there aren't what you would call Bigfoot creatures in Florida. I think there probably are. Whatever I think I saw, it's probably about 6.5 feet tall.
Okay.
When I went and checked it all out. But what I think you have in Florida that really accounts for a lot of the Bigfoot sightings. I think you got a huge huge might be an exaggeration, but I think you got a population of feral orangutans,
Oh,
chimps,
really?
and that sort of thing because Florida has tons of these monkey breeding facilities all
Oh,
over
okay. Yeah.
that they use like for research and stuff.
There's a monkey
And,
rescue center, a primate rescue center
there's,
in the middle of the
and they've
Everglades as
got,
well, isn't there? Yeah.
yeah, they've got some great ape rescue centers where like a lot of your chimps and
Yeah.
baboons and orangutans and all of that
Okay.
where where they've been rescued from places that used to test them and plus Florida has all things have changed a lot now, but at least in the older days, there used to be those old traveling circuses in
Yeah.
Florida, stuff like that. And those research, those breeding facilities, they put them in Florida because it's so much more cost effective because, even a cold night, it hardly ever gets down,
Okay.
down below reason. I mean, it does, but not enough. You know, that they
You're
had,
paying
like,
for
if you
aircon,
go
not
a
heat.
couple hundred
Yeah.
more miles north, they got to they got to enclose them so they can save so much money. So you got all these research facilities, breeding facilities. You got this exotic pet trade. And like every time a hurricane hits, that's why you got all these pythons running around everywhere. These hurricanes, everybody evacuates, and then these creatures get loose. I mean, up there's a state park me and the wife went to up near Ocala. They've got this it's the damnedest thing you ever seen. They just have these feral monkeys just just flopping around in the trees where they just got loose however many years ago,
Yeah.
and they've just got a reproducing populations of feral
It's
monkeys. So I
it's
think that's
amazing. It's
got
a
a lot.
lost world.
Yeah, yeah. I just think that has a lot to do with the and I'm not saying that there aren't any. I'm not saying that this solves everything, but I'm
No.
saying that I think. And a lot of the reports you get, a lot of the reports in Florida, I mean, it sounds like just like an orangutan or something,
Well, I mean, the famous picture of the
Yeah,
skunk ape,
Mayak skunk ape.
the
That's an
Mayak skunk.
orangutan.
It could even be a mud-covered orangutan. I mean, it's
Yeah,
because
I mean
it's
that.
dark furred.
Yeah,
Everything about it looks like an orangutan, apart
yeah,
from its color, which is very significant. I think, yeah, I've always been interested in this place. It's like a lost world. It's a bit Wild Westy, as far
it
as
is.
people
It's
and the way they live, and there's a lot of freedom
yeah,
in that. But there's
yeah,
downsides to that kind of freedom, obviously. And hurricane season, I had a friend that moved from New York recently, moved there, and took the family and got his first hurricane season, and yeah,
yeah,
it's a different world, especially if you live in a place. And I know a lot of Brits move there. A place like I've lived in London, to go somewhere that's sweltering hot all the time. There's tons
yeah,
of dangerous animals, but you live in a sort of I suppose, in a pristine, isolated place where you don't really encounter that. And you step out into the woods, see some
yeah.
orangutan standing in the tree line. What are you going to
But
think other than what on earth is this creature looking at me? Although
yeah,
your sighting, you say 6.5 feet. I mean, that's way out of the
that.
range for
Yeah, that
any
doesn't. Yeah,
orang.
that's kind of where I was like, well, I don't know if my little theory here about
Yeah.
mostly feral apes, if it really holds up for this. But then again, like I said, if I probably should have found some tracks somewhere, or
Yeah.
something. So maybe it was just the way I was holding my mouth when the wind blew. I don't I don't know. It is what it is.
Mass
Maybe
hallucination
yeah, maybe
for
I
one.
was having those hallucinations. I mean,
I'll
that's
take a mass
fine.
hallucination for one, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. Well, look, I think it's supremely interesting. Just before we to wrap up, I want to talk about you've got a new book coming out about mammoths.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really interesting to me. I love that subject. Could there be megafauna still wandering about the place? And that's really fascinating to me. What I don't give too much away, obviously, in the
Yeah.
book, but what's stoked that interest, and
Well,
is it going to be packed full of sightings and modern day reports?
yeah. So the book should be right now. I got it scheduled to come out May the 1st of 2023. I did that to give myself plenty of time. It'll probably, I think I'll probably end up getting it out in February or something, but
Okay.
the latest would be May. But anyway, this is one of those subjects that I have just always been interested in this, and one of the things, what really started that interest for me. I don't know how much of your listeners would be familiar with Louis L'Amour, but he was an American author, real famous for his Western novels, right? And I mean, he's sold like a stupid amount of books, like 300 million books in his day. But
Wow.
anyway, he would always like weave these, like, real subtle, like weave these ideas in his stories of, like, pre-Columbian contact, with the Native Americans, talking about the Irish, coming over in 500 AD and things like that. And he had this book, Jubal Sackett, that I read, and I want to say I'm like 18, 19, probably around 19. But in the book, the main character Jubal, he's got a Kickapoo companion that he's traveling with, and he was telling him about this elephant like creature that lives, and in the author later in the book, Jubal sees the mammoth, and later in the book, in the author's notes, Lamore had these little accounts where, in some of the native traditions, that they talked about mammoths still being alive, and up until, up until the 1800s in a lot of cases. So that really kind of piqued my interest. I'm like, what? It was just something that really stuck with me, and as I got older, I read Vine Deloria Jr.'s book, Red Earth, White Lies, and it's sort of a he's dead now, but he was a Native American activist, a scholar, and he sort of like took on the scientific establishment as far as back when he wrote the book, it was real popular theory that the Native Americans killed off the megafauna through overhunting. And and he makes a case that that's stupid. It's just like a stupid hypothesis. But anyway, he talks about these Native American legends, how that there were still mammoths and mastodons, on the North American continent, when the Pilgrims arrived. And so I take a lot of the book has a lot of that in there, the Native American tales. I take a lot of supposed sightings, in there, and I talk a little bit about how it might even be possible, say like in Siberia, that I'm not saying that there's any mammoths running around in Montana. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I think there may have been, as late as, a couple hundred years ago, based on some of this folklore. And, I think it's going to be a fun book. It's not, it's not something I don't think anybody's really covered a whole lot in depth, at least not recently.
There's not a lot about.
you
No,
know,
not a lot at all.
and
Yeah.
and really the gist of the book is not so much to change anybody's opinion on things. I think really what I'm trying to say is we just don't have this grasp on our past and what is in our natural world like we think we do. And one of the examples I point to, this has come about recently, that the Siberian unicorns, those big rhinoceros with the single horn, they thought that they were all extinct, 160,000 years ago. And recently they're like, oh no, they lived to like 39,000 years ago. Modern man interacted with them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, so that's like what is that? That's like a correction of 120,000 years thereabout.
That's a big
I'm just
oversight. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So for me to, if you're saying that the last mammoth went extinct like 4,000 years ago in Siberia, so I'm saying if there still are a few around, that's really not as big of a correction as the Siberian unicorn thing. So I mean, maybe it's not that crazy to think that there were still some small populations in the U.S. a few hundred years ago.
And it only ever means that's the latest date we've got, and the last specimen, or the most recently lived specimen we found. That's the date we've got. If we find other dates that are 100,000 years less than that, we'll let you know and change everything. And I think that's what a lot of people don't get. This science is settled thing again. This is the big point. It's never settled.
Yeah.
And everything we knew yesterday, practically everything, scientifically, medically, geologically has been changed already at this point. Everything that was solid, that you were a fool to think otherwise, has changed, even in recent
Yeah.
years. We're
Yeah.
talking about feathered dinosaurs and things like that. And well, if you believe there were sort of specimens, there were species of dinosaurs that had feathers 30 years ago, you were a fool. You were an idiot. Why would you think such a thing? And yet,
Yeah.
there you go. There seems to be some evidence for that. I think it's amazing. I think it's good that there are people such as yourself out there, especially traveling around the place, because as you say, you can never really beat being there, to
Yeah.
find out about a place. And it's what a great life adventure for you, Denver. Yes, packed tightly together from time to time, but I'm sure the upsides are greater. And yeah, I'm just glad to see that you're doing it. Just quickly before we wrap up, just let people know where they can find the books, and you, and especially if they've got some other great sightings to add to the research that you're doing, how they should tell you about it.
Yeah, so all my books, I just send people to Amazon. That's just everything I do is there. It's just the easiest to do. Also, if you go to my website, denvermichaels.net, I have links to all my books, so they'll either take you back to Amazon or to the publisher's webpage for the books that I have publishers with. You can find me on YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel. I'm real active on Twitter. Uh, a little bit active on Facebook, but mostly on Twitter. But I also do interact with Facebook too. So you can find me at all those places.
Fantastic. And Dermot, it's as always, it's a real pleasure.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed being there with you, in these segments of your updates on Facebook and today in the interview. Just keep it coming. We want to find out more. And
yeah, man.
yeah, get back down to Florida and get some of them orangs for us. We'd love to see them.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
All right, bye bye.